I'm Deepak Chopra, and I guess it's unnecessary to keep repeating my name since I'm here every day with you. And today I am at the SCIENCE conference. SCIENCE stands for Science and Non-Duality in San Jose, and my very special guest is Dr. Anoop Kumar. And I want to talk a little bit about his book, Michelangelo's Medicine, How Redefining the Human Body Will Transform Health and Health Care. And Anoop is actually an emergency room doctor in the Washington area. And I have read this book, and it's actually very good, very interesting, and along the lines of my own thinking. But I want him to explain to you why, first of all, he calls it Michelangelo's medicine. But then let's get on to the details of your construct about the physical body, subtle body, and all that.
Sure. So a couple years ago, I went to Florence, and while I was there, I saw the Statue of David. And when I saw the Statue of David, what really struck me is that this statue is not just a physical structure. When you stand near it, you can notice not only the subtle detail of the physical anatomy, but you can notice the presence. You can notice the determination in David's gaze, and you can feel the overall presence of that structure. And I thought, wow, this must be the genius of Michelangelo, that he can show us not only the physical body, but somehow through that, he can communicate something more subtle. And then I thought, when I went to medical school, what I learned about was the physical body. And yet all of us know that we are something more than just physicality. All of us experience thought, all of us experience emotion, all of us experience intuition, and yet if you learn anatomy, you'll never learn that these are a part of you. Nor can these be defined by aggregations of atoms or aggregations of little things. Intuition is not a thing. And so when I put all this together, I felt that I wanted to contribute a more complete perspective on human anatomy to healthcare. And I think that's essential to moving forward in this era of healthcare reform.
So Anoop, I noticed though that the models that you create here have something to do with the ancient wisdom traditions and the models that are pretty much dominant in the tradition of Ayurveda as well.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the physical body, the mental body, the energetic body, and being. So explain all these bodies.
Okay. So the
Sthul Sharir, Karan Sharir,
right.
Sukshma Sharir.
Right.
Go ahead.
So the physical body is the one that we all know, we all love. We dress the physical body every day. We feed the physical body every day. It grows as we grow, and at some point in our age, it actually starts to get smaller. So we all know what the physical body is. The mental body is what I mentioned just a few minutes ago. Our thoughts, our emotions, our intuition, those subtle aspects of us that we experience every day. Now just note that what most of us experience of ourselves is the mental body, right? Even though science says we're a heart, we're a liver, we're bones, we're muscles, we're blood, very few of us actually experience those things. When's the last time you experienced your left third toe, right? This is part of our physical body, but the way we experience ourselves is as happiness. Now I'm happiness. Now I'm sadness. Now I may be frustration. It's the mind is how we experience ourselves. So that is the mental body. The energetic body is more subtle. I would say that it's actually a deeper layer of the mind. I say that it's something separate because I think it has a more sensory quality to it. It has a more direct experiential quality than, say, the mind, which can appear to be a flow of experiences, like the flow of thoughts or the flow of emotions. Energy is something that we can feel subtly all the time.
Like when?
That energy.
Okay.
And so it's important to note that these three are not different from each other. The energetic body itself, when aggregated, forms these emotions, forms the thoughts that we feel. And that itself is our body. And that's why if you change the physical body, as we do in yoga, you can change the mental body and the energetic body. It's also true that if you change the energetic body, you'll change your mind and you'll change your body. And this is where this east-west perspectives are complementary. I will say that beyond the three bodies, there is a fourth domain, and it's actually not a fourth in the sense of a separate category. It is the domain that pervades all three, and that's the underlying plane of being or awareness or consciousness, whatever we might choose to call it. And it is that itself which appears as any and all of the other three bodies, including what we call the universe.
So the energetic body, the subtle body, which is thought body, emotional body, and the physical body, they are an experience that being is having, right?
Yes.
So they are in time, but being is not in time.
No. So for time to exist, there has to be some kind of movement, some kind of fluctuation, or some kind of point in awareness. So I can say that we started this conversation a few minutes ago, but that's relative to my point of awareness now. So this bracket is what we call time, between these two parentheses of starting and stopping. But these are occurring in being itself, in pure awareness itself, in which there is no focus of attention. So if you take away the focus of this time, whatever it is now, and you take away the focus of whenever we started this conversation, then time is no longer existent, because that is just pure being, awareness without a focus of awareness, or another way to say it is awareness without manifestation.
So the more we connect, or shouldn't say connect, but the more we settle in being and experience the timeless factor in every time-bound experience, does that actually influence the subtle body and physical body? Does that actually change the manifest body?
Yes, it has to change the manifest body, because the very act of abiding as being, see, that's the key. I would phrase it this way: it is abiding as being. And if one abides as being, the sense of identity is no longer localized in the physical body or the mental body or even in the energetic and subtle bodies. And so by the very fact of identification being released from these more superficial layers of identification, by that very fact, biology changes, mental physiology changes, and energetic physiology changes. It has to.
So for a reader of your book, Michelangelo's Medicine, Redefining the Human Body, as you've so elegantly explained, how will that transform their health? And should we adopt this model, how would that transform healthcare in general?
I would say two ways. The most simple and perhaps most impactful way, and the most immediate way, is that stress is released from the body. See, stress always exists relative to a point of identification. Stress always exists relative to a particular identity. So I'm a physician. If I'm in the emergency department and I have 3 patients arriving simultaneously, one with a potential stroke, a potential heart attack, and let's say a stab wound. Now, if I get stressed, I'm the doctor, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, that creates a change in my physiology, of course. My pupils will dilate, my heart rate will increase, my blood pressure will increase, and accordingly, those are the conditions that are favorable for plaque buildup in our arteries. So there are immediate biological changes. Now, they won't all happen simultaneously, but those factors are set into motion because of my reliance on only that identity. On the other hand, if I recognize that a physician is who I am in this moment, and I will execute that to the best of my ability based on my training and my experience, then the stress is taken out of that situation, because all I am is not only a physician. All that I am is not localized and focused and poured into and concretized as that identity, which cannot sustain all that I am or all that any of us are. We're all so much more than just a physical structure. And yet, if that misidentification takes place, there's a tremendous amount of stress that goes into maintaining that identity, which can often not be recognized because it has become a habit. So that's the first thing, is the release in stress can create significant improvements in quality of life right now that point the healthcare system away from other-based care and self-care, meaning that a independence from having to rely on experts, and rather a dependence on one's own ability to heal and on self-care. Not that we don't listen to experts, but we know how to contextualize that care within self-care. That's number one. I would say number two, the number two way that it would help healthcare and evolve healthcare is that we will develop new technologies. Because right now, we still think that the world that we're in, including the healthcare system we're in, is made up of things. So we still think that, you know, the scalpel is a thing that's going to cut out the organ, which is a thing. And the reason that organ has a problem is because it has a disease, which is another thing. So we're caught in this world of things. And as long as we're caught in the world of things, we will develop technology that is made up of things, that depends on things. And yet, once we recognize that things themselves are nothing but activities, once we recognize that things themselves are nothing but processes, once we recognize that things themselves are nothing but appearances of consciousness as something more significant, just as the dream last night you had was nothing but the appearance of your mind appearing as matter. When we realize that, all of a sudden, the set of possibilities for technology goes up infinitely, because we're no longer limited to physical technology. We can harness physical technology, but we can harness so much more.
So we are going to take a 15-second break, but before I take that break, I just was reminded, you know, when I was with Maharishi, and people would talk about stress, that one of the conferences, at the end of the conferences, everybody walked away, and he called me and he whispered in my ear, he said, "What is this stress?" I had never heard the word. So I said, it's the perception of threat. And he said, no. What I'm understanding is the interference with the spontaneous flow of intelligence as it moves from the unmanifest to the manifest, from the causal body to the subtle body, the energetic body, and the physical body, which I thought was very brilliant. So we'll come back in 15 seconds and we'll talk about the deeper reality. So I'm back here with Anoop, Dr. Anoop Kumar. The book is Michelangelo's Medicine. You can go to Amazon and order it. And I hope to see some movement. I think we all deserve to understand this knowledge, which could redefine how we look at ourselves and our bodies and our minds and health in general. While we were taking the break, I was reminded of something that I had read in the Shiva Sutras. It's Lord Shiva talking to Parvati. He says, meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of awareness. Once again, meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of awareness. So let's talk about the relationship between fundamental reality, awareness, and how that actually is all there is, and the subtle body of mind, intellect, and ego, the energetic body, what we call pranamaya kosha in Sanskrit, the physical body, and the universe are actually nothing other than fluctuations of being or awareness. First of all, say it in your words, because you do a very good job, and then why is that important?
Okay, so meditate on your body as if it's the universe. So if we could just take that beautiful phrase. So if we ask ourselves, what is our body? What is our body? Not according to some scientist, not according to a teacher, not according to what we read in a book. In our own direct experience right now, what is the body? And I think we'll see that the body is a series of experiences. It's a series of experiences.
So it's not a noun, it's just a verb.
It's a verb, it's an activity. It's a ceaseless activity is the body, right? And that's why the body I have now and you have now is different from the one you had when you were born. It's different from the one that you will have in a few years, and even different from the one that you woke up with. After you woke up, many cells sloughed off of your skin. It's not the same body anymore, right? The body is constantly changing. The mind is constantly changing. And how we experience it is as a series of experiences, or as a series of activities, or as a series of fluctuations. At the most subtle level, our bodies are a series of fluctuations. And when you get to that level, when we look at it at that level, then there's no difference between the body and the universe, because this is an artificial boundary, right? If I say my body ends here, why does my body end here? It is strictly only because I say my physical sensation stops here. Is there any other reason? Because this body is nothing but the environment recycled. The environment transformed into another form is the body. There's no hard difference. It's an arbitrary difference based upon sensation.
So let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
Then the body is not the container of awareness, it's an experience in awareness.
The body is an experience in awareness, and it's not even an experience. It's a series of activities that we have labeled as experience. Mm-hmm. And one particularly so, which is the brain. And we say that brain is so important, but the brain is fundamentally no different than the rest of the body, which is no different than the environment, which is no different than any other fluctuation we might experience.
So this morning I tweeted out that, consciousness is fundamental and without cause, and somebody, responded. This is then experience the world without your brain. You knock the brain off, there's no experience, and I had to go to a length to say that the brain itself is an experience in consciousness like anything else. It's a human word for an experience, just like a cloud is a human word for an experience, or stars and galaxies, or anything we can name and describe is a human construct for an experience. But what do you say to those people that the brain is the source of experience? The brain, including our friend, your friend, Dr. Anil Seth, has been talking about the world being a controlled hallucination produced by the brain. And if the brain is also a part of experience, then we're arguing that a hallucination is producing the hallucination. Address the idea of brain producing consciousness.
There's zero evidence that the brain produces consciousness. And I just want to say that again for people who think like me, people who don't think like me, for scientists, for people who are logical, for people who are artistic. There is zero evidence that the brain produces consciousness. There is an abundance of evidence that the brain and consciousness occur together. Okay, so again, there's zero evidence that the brain produces or causes consciousness, simply because even once the body dies, once apparently the brain is separating from experience, nobody has done scientific studies of that, right? I don't know any dead scientists that are doing studies independent of a physical brain. So without doing that, there's zero evidence that it is the living brain that is producing consciousness. And yet there's abundant evidence that the brain occurs simultaneously in consciousness. With consciousness. So the question is, what is the relationship between brain and consciousness? That's really the question. We've ignored the question. We have come to an answer that is convenient because that's what was taught to us, and we've kind of fed on this belief system, and now it becomes hard to undo it. But if we go back to the fundamental question, the question is, what is the relationship between brain and consciousness? That's what I would say. And furthermore, the brain, being what we call a physical object, is fundamentally no different than any other physical object. If the screen, I'm saying, is an object of my perception, then what we call a brain is also the object of my perception, or a surgeon's perception, or an anatomist's perception. These are objects of awareness. These are objects in consciousness.
Fluctuations.
There are fluctuations. There are.
So, is it a convenient thing to say that mind and brain are complementary activities of consciousness?
I think it's convenient, but I don't like it. I don't prefer it, because if you say that the mind, we're only making brain and mind complementary. We're only saying it's complementary. We're only considering them in the same sentence because brain seems so darn important. Because the brain seems so darn important. And yes, it is important within a particular paradigm. But there is nothing to say that this shirt is also not of the nature of mind. It sounds bizarre. This sounds bizarre to say this shirt is also mind. But fundamentally, is this also not a perception? Is this also not a fluctuation? And is mind not of the nature of fluctuation? So we're not talking about the human level of consciousness where it's just me speaking as Anoop. We're talking about fundamental consciousness. At a level of fundamental consciousness, the brain is a perception. And we can say mind, brain are complementary, but ultimately all of these are fluctuations.
So whether we are talking about mind, brain, body, universe, they're all different fluctuations of the same
Yes,
consciousness, right?
absolutely.
That is the true meaning of Tattvamasi. Huh?
Tattvamasi, the true meaning where there is no more tat and there's no more tvam. So tat is that, which refers to being or consciousness or awareness. And tvam refers to you and I as individuals. So tattvamasi, that thou art. But the real meaning is hidden behind the words that and thou. The superficial meanings have to be removed, and it basically means being is. Awareness is.
That alone is.
That alone is.
Okay, and so in this context, what is death?
So
What people call physical death.
So death is transformation, right? So what happens at death is the body changes form. We all know this. From a scientific perspective, this is true. The body that was cohesive as limbs, as a head, as a trunk, gets transformed into energy. It decomposes first into more natural elements, and it gets transformed as energy into soil, into the soil for the next wave of life, let's say. So death is a transformation. The problem is when our identity is concretized in the physical body, then there is a fear of death because we believe that we will end when the body in this form ends. When this form ends, we will end. This is the direct result of identification in the body, of consciousness taking a point of awareness and remaining as a point of awareness. Then we get afraid whenever that point of awareness is challenged or whenever it moves to something unfamiliar. Death is transformation. In order for something to be born, something dies. See, we can think of when the spermatozoan first fertilizes the ovum, that we can think of that as the beginning of human life. But both the sperm and the previous egg die for that new zygote to be born. And furthermore, when that becomes a fetus, when that becomes a baby in utero, in the womb, then the previous stages, the blastula, so on and so forth, are gone, and now we actually have a baby. So that died, the baby was born. When the baby comes out of the birth canal, now we have a neonate. The previous baby in womb, we could say, is not the same. It transformed into something new. And so on through the stages of life.
So birth and death in that sense are happening now.
All the time, every time.
Eternally,
yes.
In timeless being.
Every thought is a birth. That gets transformed to something else. That's a death. Right now, my skin is alive and it's dead. The superficial layers are dead, the middle layers are dying, and the deepest layers are being born. And this is constant. And this is a metaphor for what is happening at all levels.
Reincarnation is happening here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now.
Absolutely. The cycle is non-stop. We choose arbitrary points, that is death, this is birth, that is death. But in fact, these are non-stop happenings, non-stop activities.
And being itself is not subject to birth or death.
No, being, because by definition, being is transformation-less. Being is transformation-less. That which transforms is what we call manifestation, is what we call the universe, is what we call life, etc. But being is the undoing of all those activities. It's when all those perturbations come to a stillness. And in that stillness, there are no points of awareness. And therefore, that is beyond time, that's beyond birth, that's beyond death, and that's why it's known as the immortal state, immortality.
Very good. So immortality, of course, doesn't mean endless time. It means not in time at all.
Yes, yes.
That which was never born.
That which is never, not that you don't die, it's that right now you were never born. That's immortality.
Okay, check out the book, Michelangelo's Medicine, How Redefining the Human Body Will Transform Health and Healthcare. Thank you, Anoop, for this very enlightening conversation, and many more to come.